All right, now we're going to take a look at how to remove duplicates. Data comes in very messy a lot of times, so it's always good to double check and make sure that you don't have duplicates and you're not going to end up analyzing or reporting false numbers. Let's jump back over to the workbook we've been working on here. And remember that we have a column for row ID and a column for order ID, order date. So we can do some double checking here. One thing I like to do over at the far right or just at the end of my data set is add something called a row count. Row count, give it one word, and just add a 1, and then we can actually count things up. And I'll duplicate that all the way down, so it's just a 1 for every row. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do a pivot table now by clicking on Insert and Pivot Table. It'll automatically select the range. I hit OK. Now I can actually drag row ID down onto rows, and I can take my row count and add that and see how many times the row ID appears. Okay, so it looks like some, we've just got 1. Let's scroll all the way down. Okay, this looks pretty good. So, towards the bottom, it looks like we actually have some duplicates. Look at that. So these row IDs, 8378, 79, appear 2 or sometimes 3 times. So that's an issue. So this basic first step tells us we do have duplicates. All right. So let's go back to our sheet and let's figure out how we can identify them. Obviously, we have them here, so we could just do a lookup on that. And we know how to do VLOOKUP, so let's try that first. And then what we'll do is I'll show you a more sophisticated way of how to do it. So I'm going to insert a column on the very far left, and I normally don't do that because what happens is a lot of times a formula or something may reference one of these columns, so I don't want to mess with it. But right now we're cleaning it, so we're not quite ready to analyze. So we have a column here called dupe ? And I can do a VLOOKUP just like I did recently. And I'm going to look up the row ID. I'm going to click on my sheet here. Now I'm going to select columns A and B. It's important that I select the column and not one of the values, because what happens is if I click inside of the pivot table, a lot of times I'll get pivot data formula, and that's not what I want here. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I click on the column all the way at the top, and then I hold Shift and I click on the second column. So just like before, I'm going to lock that in place, and I will return the second one with an exact match. So this is telling me how many times this row shows up. So I have that, so that's one piece. It doesn't quite yet tell me if it's a dupe, because I basically want to say yes or no. Okay, so now I'm going to have a formula around this. So VLOOKUP is the first one. The next one I want to do is, very simply, is this greater than 1? False. So if it were greater than 1, it would say true, and that would tell me that my duplicate was there. So I'll copy this guy down, and I'll go all the way to the bottom, and you can see these ones down here at the bottom are all true, or several of them are. So very simply, I've been able to identify where my duplicates are. So step 1 was build a pivot table, make sure that to see if I have duplicates, and if I don't, then I'm good. But here I do, so let's go identify them. Step 1, we've been able to identify them. Now, this hasn't quite helped us in actually eliminating them. All we know now is that there is a duplicate. Well, one thing that we can do now is we need to identify the first one as not a duplicate and then all the subsequent ones as duplicates. So what that'll do is that'll allow us to filter and then delete all of our duplicate data. So I'm going to insert another column here just by selecting in column A and saying insert. And I'm going to say remove ? So this will tell me if I should remove the column. So it's going to be a bit more complex of a formula, but I'll take it slow and walk you through it so you can understand, because this is going to be something you're going to want to do a lot of times, over and over again. So there's a formula called COUNTIF. and you can see what it does. It counts the number of cells within a range that meet a given condition. So what do you think we're going to do there? We're going to say count if the range, in this case it's going to be column C, equals the value in the cell C2. And just like the absolute versus relative references, as we copy this down, it's going to move that cell reference down. So I hit enter and it says this cell C2 appears once in the column C, meaning it's not a duplicate. We have a double check there that it says false, so that is a good indicator. Now, if I were to copy this down, it essentially would still do the same thing. It would just identify which ones have more and more duplicates, which ones are duplicates. So I'll do that now just to see how it works and validate that our formula is working. You can see this one takes a little bit more time to calculate. And down here you can see all these guys that are the duplicates, and of course they say true next to it because they're looking up on our pivot table, and you can see how many times they appear. Okay, so how are we going to get this to tell us which one to remove versus not? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask this formula to tell me how do I know which one to remove. And so the way I'm going to do that is still using COUNTIF, but in a little bit of a different manner. So as you recall, the relative reference, as I copy that down, it's going to move the cell range that I'm looking at. So I'm going to start out with COUNTIF again, and this time I'm going to scroll over and I'm going to select from here up. Then I'm going to hit comma and tell it the criteria is column C2. So this will tell me how many times does this number appear from the cell I'm on all the way to the top. Now, you're probably guessing if I were to copy this down that it would only look at the top 2 cells above it. You are correct. This is where we need to actually add in the locking of the top cell. So while the second part of it copies all the way down, the first one stays consistent. Okay, so let's lock the top cell here using our F4 shortcut just like we were. And then we'll leave it as C2 for the second part of that table or array, because as we copy it down, you'll see what's going to happen. I'll just copy this down a few times. You can see how it changes now. So you can see what it's doing here is it's looking at from C1 to C3, how many times does C3 appear? So as we copy this down to the duplicates, what's going to happen is you're going to see it go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or up to as many times as it appears. So with that, I'll just copy this all the way down, Command and Shift, or Control and Shift, and then Control D. And that stands for duplicate, so it's going to duplicate the formula all the way down. And so now as I go down towards the bottom here, let's go ahead and sort our columns in order, or sort row ID, so that way we can see them and how they're happening. So we're going to sort smallest to largest. And so they're all in order now. And so what we're going to do is just go down. I'll jump all the way down to the bottom because I know there's some duplicates there. And you can see what happens here. So where the duplicate is, you'll see it's a 1 and then 2 right below it. So you can see that. You can see that we know this one is a duplicate because it's looking up off of our pivot table. And then it's counting the first one as it appears 1 time from here and above, and the next one from 2 times and above. So what that's saying is we can actually just filter on this remove column or change the formula to say remove yes or no, because if it equals anything more than 1, then we should remove it. So let's go back up and make that adjustment. So now by adding the greater 1 to our formula here, when we hit enter, it's going to tell us if this is the first occurrence, and if so, that's okay. Otherwise, if it's the second or third occurrence, then we need to remove it. So if I jump all the way down to the bottom, you can see where we have some cases here. In this case, the row ID 40 is being repeated, and so the first one is okay, but the second one needs to be deleted. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add the filter to this. That way we can actually just find those and then remove them. So I'm going to click over on sort and filter, say filter, that'll remove the previous ones. Click it again and it adds it to all the rows. Now I can just go here and say true. And there you go. I'll highlight all these rows here. And I will right click and delete row. Okay, now when I go ahead and clear my filter, you can see where they're still ones that were showing up from the previous table that were duplicates, but now they're only showing up once in our list. So we have now an actual clean list, and if we wanted to check, it looks like the row ID, which is just incremented for each row, matches the row count with the addition of the header row. So we're good. We've been able to successfully remove duplicates. Now, it probably took about 5 too many steps in here, but I wanted to explain all the different things happening. So as you go through this, you can understand maybe shortcuts or different ways that are more effective to you to give you confidence that you've transformed the data into a clean data set that you can then analyze.